Hey friends, it is chrisloewen here again with another episode from our Outside the Walls podcast. In this podcast, we have a lot of conversations with people of different perspectives from what many of us would normally encounter on a day-to-day basis. As we have mentioned before, the ideas and the topics that we discuss in each episode are there for us to consider, but there is no expectation or pressure for everyone to agree, nor are these even official position of Crossview Church. The desire in this podcast is to have healthy dialogue from a posture of curiosity with the goal to listen and to learn without feeling the pressure to agree with everything that is said in each episode. Alright, so in today's episode, we have a friend of ours on the show named Jody Milburn. Jody has spent the last 15 years as a consultant working with businesses, nonprofits, government, in business planning, HR consulting, leadership development, and team training. Today, as the general manager of Home Field People and Strategy, whose core purpose is to create happy, healthy, and productive workplaces, Jody oversees a team across the prairies to accomplish exactly that purpose. And so in today's conversation, we are going to talk about what a healthy workplace culture could look like. And I know for myself, I found this conversation to be particularly insightful, encouraging, and extremely practical. And so please welcome to the show, Jody Milburn. All right. It is so good to have Jody join us today. How are you doing, Jody?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Excited to be here.
That's awesome. Chris and I are really excited about this conversation. So, Jody, why don't we just start things off by, tell us who you are, about your family, and maybe some of the things you're doing today.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm Jody. My day job, I would say my 9 to 5 job, and Paul would call me a liar. My day job is general manager of Home Field People and Strategy, which is we specialize in organizational development for companies. And I get to work with an amazing group of people that get to help businesses and organizations. So that's my 9 to 5 job. We'll call it 9 to 5. And I live in Steinbach, Manitoba, with my husband of almost 25 years. And if you can believe it or not, I know I always tell people I got married when I was 3, and and we've got 2 teenagers, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. So it's a whole new time of life, which I absolutely love. And so I've always loved my work life, and I've always loved my home life and my family life. And Paul and I have both had a combination of entrepreneurship and employment for businesses. And our kids have always been a really integral part of that. They've always been part of knowing what makes things tick. And for fun, we love to go to the lake. So we spend a lot of time at the lake as a family, and we doing water sports. We don't fish. We wakeboard, we tube, we kneeboard, all those things, and spend hours and hours and hours sitting around a campfire and spending time on the lake. So that's a little bit about me.
That is so awesome. And Jody, I've had such a good time getting to know you over the last couple of years. It's been amazing. And one of the reasons we have you on this podcast is because your expertise. You spend all your time coaching with business leaders and leaders in the marketplace about, workplace culture, direction, all that sort of stuff. And we want to hear lots of your wisdom on that. First, though, we just want to hear a bit of your story. Is you started a business a bunch of years ago while your kids were younger. Mm-hmm. And we would just love to hear a little bit of that story, because I think there's a lot of wisdom to be taken out of that. Young people or young parents or families where they're starting a business. Tell us a bit of your story of how you came to be where you are today and how you got started and all that.
Yeah, I would love to. So we had Zane already, and then we had Holly, and she was about 6 months older. So Zane would have been around 3. And I realized, you know what, I love to work in the workplace outside of the home. I find that to be invigorating. It's stimulating for my brain, and it's something that I wanted to make sure that I got back and did. However, I didn't want to just leave my kids for no reason at all. I wanted to do something I was passionate about. It's always been something that's important to me, is to do work that I can get excited about. Once I stop getting excited about it, once I stop loving it, well, then I want to look for the next thing to do, whether it's a different education component, whether it's a promotion, whether it's changing a job altogether. So I thought, well, I want to do something I love. And so I actually sat down and made a list of, what do I love to do? What do I hate to do? What do I think I'm actually gifted at? Like, what do I think, if I'm going to be honest, am I actually really good at? And what am I terrible at? And so I landed on a business concept, working with business owners who were looking to grow their business and found themselves stuck in a place of whirlwind, where they actually just couldn't get out of the day-to-day craziness of being the expert widget maker, right? Whatever it was that caused them to start their business and grow and be successful. I saw a familiar challenge of them not knowing how to extract themselves from the actual work. And honestly, I just grew a heart for that, because I would see employees who were loyal to that business owner, who cared about them, who saw them burning out and saw them struggling, and at the same time were incredibly frustrated because there are crappy places to work. Like, it's like, I want to work here because I care about you and I like the general idea of what we do here, but you are very stressful to work for. And so I don't like that. Yeah. And so I came up with a business concept to really focus on helping those leaders put in HR principles, putting in simple things like employee handbooks, some leadership training, some strategic planning, really just helping put in some basic fundamentals so that they could get out of the whirlwind of day to day and get unstuck and actually lead the business and lead their people. And just put in some simple practices. So I started that business kind of out of the basement of my home when Holly was, she was about 6 months old. Zane was about 3. And I did the math on child tax credit versus take home pay versus daycare versus all what I had to earn in order to break even at the end of the day. I did all the math and slowly grew my business so that by the time Holly was in school, I had a more than full-time gig working for myself. And so that was kind of how I started working for myself. And then over time, I did that for probably about 10 years and had really interesting clients from across the province in a variety of different sectors, developing a bunch of different material and different coaching. And then how I landed here was I started working with my very best friend in all the land. I started working with Steph, and she had at the time started Summit Organizational Development, grew her team, and it had always been our dream to work together as best friends. We'd always been close in every aspect of our lives and shared a love of work and always pushed and encouraged each other in that work, that life balance, our passions, our strengths. And so I got the chance to join her team and stop working alone and working on a team. And so we've been working together for 7 years and then find ourselves here now.
I met you guys. Well, I might have met you at church in passing or whatever before, but knowing who you were or whatever, but I met you when we actually did a little bit of work with you a few years ago. Yeah. And it was just exciting, this stuff, you were kind of doing with us and stuff. Now, you had a mission statement or kind of a vision statement or purpose that you guys had that I thought was really exciting. I think a lot of our listeners, because we all have to work, we all have to do some kind of work in the world. We spend a big chunk of our lives having to work. And I was really captivated at the time by the vision that you and Steph had at Summit. Can you just tell everybody what your vision is or was at that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was that first Summit. And then, of course, a couple of years ago, Steph sold Summit to Golden West Broadcasting. And so now we both get to work under that umbrella as Home Field People and Strategy. And the core purpose remains the same, which I think, still excites me too, which is really, we work to create happier, healthier, more productive workplaces so people can go home at the end of the day to have capacity to have happier, healthier home lives. And ultimately, that gives capacity for families to contribute to community. And we know that a healthy community creates healthy business. And so all the work we do, everything we do, and which is still inspires me. And now I've been in this world for 16 years, living to that purpose. It just doesn't get old because work takes so much of our time. And like you said, Chris, we have to work. Most of us, right? We have to work.
I do.
Yeah. And so to be able to help workplaces actually make those places life-giving instead of life-sucking, to me is one of the biggest purposes that I could ever ask for. And when I have business owners, like, metric of success, I've had a high-level executive say to me once, Joe, like I can actually sleep at night. Like I can actually sleep at night now. I just get so excited, right? Because it's not only the employees who need to have capacity for their loved ones, it's also the leaders. It's also the business owners. It's also, it's collective. And so, so that still remains our core purpose today.
I love that. So I'm sure in the last 16 years, you've spent thousands of hours consulting and coaching. And so I'm really curious to know what's the secret to a healthy workplace culture? Where people want to go to work and they don't feel drained by work. What are those key ingredients to a healthy workplace culture?
Yeah. So, I would have my own opinion. You could read a lot of different ideas and different versions. What I've seen, what I've experienced, and what we strive to kind of help our businesses we work for and also our own team accomplish, I would say it's a couple things. One is leaders who know how to be transparent with their own struggles, their own challenges, and who lead from a growth mindset, right? Carol Dweck, her concept in her book Mindset, right? This idea of a growth mindset versus a closed mindset, right? That we can learn from mistakes. And that as leaders who actually lead that way from a place of transparency to their teams, not just tell their teams, right? Because we know a lot of leaders, a lot of us lead from a place of, it's okay if you make a mistake. We'll learn from it. It's okay, right? We're used to actually leading in that way that we give permission to our teams to do that. But the healthiest workplaces have leaders who say, I made a mistake, actually, here. And this is what I learned from it.
Like a specific situation where it's not just sort of generalized. Yeah, I've made mistakes in my past.
Yes, and not just past.
Yeah.
Yes, not just past mistakes, but even today. Like a leader that can actually stand in it and be human and demonstrate current state growth mindset. To me, that is an integral pillar to a healthy culture. Because what that does then is it actually doesn't just tell people we have permission to learn and grow, but we actually see it right in front of us. So I think that's one of the keys. Another is I'm a huge fan of Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I think healthy workplaces really model those 5 behaviors, and leaders consistently strive to build principles around those. Which is vulnerability-based trust, healthy conflict, commitment, accountability, and finally results. And so, healthy teams actually have conflict, right? I think a healthy workplace culture is one where coworkers can disagree and disagree passionately and still have respect for each other when they walk away at the end of the day. And then, of course, any healthy culture has a feedback loop where we're actually giving feedback and we're asking for feedback as an organization. The healthiest organizations I've seen work not only give really consistent supportive feedback, but believe it or not, give very consistent corrective feedback. The most dysfunctional teams are those who actually don't hold each other accountable. The most dysfunctional teams are those in which leaders can't have those difficult conversations in a growth-minded way.
What? Do you mind if I jump in for a second here, Jody? So, and I think maybe there's some tie-in between these two things, but why do you think it is So you've had a lot of experience with, hundreds of different organizations. Literally, that's what you've been doing for a decade and a half or whatever, a little more. Why is it that some of these teams don't engage in conflict? Like, what's going on behind the scenes, or what, and why do some leaders not admit mistakes? Like, what's going on there?
I think it's the same reason why we see Instagram feeds of perfectly posed pictures. Like, it requires such a level of vulnerability and lack of ego and willingness to be human, right? So I think it really comes down to the human nature of self-preservation in some ways. And I think sometimes leaders think they have to have the answers. I think that's also why they feel like my team expects me to be great at this. My team expects me to know how to do all of this. They're not going to trust me or have confidence in me if they know that I made a mistake, or if they know that I could have done this better. So I think that that's part of it. And then I think in general, again, as Patrick Lencioni would say, healthy conflict has to be, and accountability has to be modeled by the leader. If a leader is not going to be holding their team members accountable, team members aren't going to hold each other accountable, because they're going to say to the leader, I'm not doing your dirty work. Forget it. If you don't have the guts to have this difficult conversation with someone who you are the leader of, who am I to have the conversation with them?
Yeah.
That's good. What would you say?
And it's backwards, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
What would you say to someone, like, let's say someone, I'm a person who, I love to talk to people. I just absolutely love to talk to people. And I love to be around people. And I don't know if any of our staff here at Crossview is listening to this podcast. Hopefully they're going to be like, oh yeah, he's living this. But like, what would you say to someone? So now you have to give you're feeling something inside. You are not happy with the way something is going, but because you're nice, right? Or whatever. Like, you don't want to make it personal. You're afraid, or maybe you're afraid of taking that negative feedback back towards you or whatever. Like, what would be a quick, this obviously isn't a coaching session. You're speaking very generally here, but what would you say to someone right now? One of those people who, they're just nice. They love to be with people. They're a boss, but they get bothered by stuff and they just push it down. Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I would actually turn this into a coaching session, Chris.
I would
actually ask for you as a leader, right? I would ask that leader, like, what actually do you want for the people you lead? What is your heart for them? What do you, as their leader, what do you want for them?
Oh, like, you're actually asking me.
I'm actually asking. Oh yeah, I am turning this into a coaching session. Yeah, yeah.
I love this.
Paul, if Paul were here right now, he'd say, "Oh yeah, Chris, I live with this all the time.
Yeah.
Don't turn your client stuff on me. Yeah, what's your heart for your team?"
I want them to do a good job. So if I'm thinking about the church here, I want our staff to be. So I'm trying not to just give like one of those general answers. I'm trying to like give something real here. I want my team to be happy, so that they do a really good job, so that people who come to Crossview are happy. Like, I want them, when they come here, to meet with staff who are pumped about their jobs, and they have good communication. When there's a problem, they're back and forth. They want to help you. They want to serve you. And I think in order to do that, our staff have to be happy. That's basically what I want. I want happy people doing happy, good work.
Right. Absolutely. And that would be, I think, what every single leader would say, right? That they want happy people doing good work. I'll tell you what doesn't make me happy, right? As an employee, right? If I would be an employee and I was doing something wrong, and I knew my boss or my leader had this feeling of irritation every time they saw me. If I would actually know what was going on in their mind and in their gut, and that actually they looked at me and were frustrated by a lack of performance. But I'm happy. Like, I'm going about my work thinking this is fantastic. Or I may have a little feeling like, I don't think this is good. and no one ever talked to me about it, that wouldn't make me happy. Or if my career would never progress. You know, I've had conversations with people who had leaders who never had a difficult conversation with them ever, and their career was stunted. Because they kind of had this label of, oh, they always, like, that's their problem, right? And so when I look at a leader like yourself who really truly has a heart for your team to be successful, or any other leader who actually were so relational, I just want you to feel great, right? I want you to come into work feeling great. The formula for feeling great is clarity.
Right. I wonder.
And if we're not clear,
that
doesn't feel great.
I wonder if half the problem is that often as leaders, and I know this would be something, I mean, having Orville here, for those of you who are from Crossview, but as our exec pastor has been so helpful here, because I wonder if half the problem sometimes is us as leaders just aren't really clear. We don't really know what our staff, what success looks like. And then you sort of get this built up sense of like, oh, I'm kind of bugged and I don't know that you're doing right, but I don't even really know how to give you feedback without just it being personal or something. I don't know.
Totally. Well, and that's where, again, right, we do a lot of work with clients around formulas for this feedback, because it's hard to know, how do we do this, right? So we actually have formulas that we walk through, that we practice, that we prep, and I still use these formulas. Again, I've been doing this for like lots and lots of years. When I have to give tough feedback to someone, which is even sometimes clients, right? When they say to me, Jode, don't use your mom voice, okay? Well, don't make me use my mom voice, right? So sometimes we have to give feedback, right? But not making a personal, Chris, like that's totally key, right? Focusing on the behavior, focusing on the impact, right? When you didn't follow through on this in the time that you said you would, that meant that now Bob's work was delayed and Mary's work was delayed, and now our volunteer team wasn't equipped, actually, to feel like they could do a fantastic job. What are your thoughts on that? Right?
Right.
And again, we're not, let's have a dialogue.
And putting a question even there, like, what do you think about that? Kind of puts it, you're not attacking. It's very action behavior based. Yeah.
And then you clarify, this is what my and they'll probably say, yeah, I know, I totally missed that deadline. And you can talk about reset those expectations. And as Mr. Dale Carnegie would say in How to Win Friends and Influence People, right?
Yeah.
He would say, give them a fine reputation to stand up to, right? I know that you care so deeply. And I am so excited to see next week. I'm so pumped to see you do that on time and to get that done and to see everybody excited. Because you know what? Then that person is really happy because they know they missed the mark. So instead of living with this silent shame and beat up, you're bringing it to the light, right? And to me, that's biblical. Bring it to the light. Get rid of the shame. Talk about it. They know, right? Our teams know when they are not performing. They know. The kindest thing we can do is bring it to the light, walk alongside, re-clarify expectations, and then when they follow through, celebrate. And the next week, you as the leader need to remember to go back and say, you know what? You did that. Like, we talked about it. You reset yourself, and look at that. I am so proud of you. That's a happy employee.
You know what? I'm really enjoying this observing a coaching session between you and Chris.
Yeah, I know, right?
But you know what? At the same time, I'm
pastor to this.
But at the same time, I'm listening to some of your comments, and it's like, okay, I'm making little connections in my mind with my scenario. Like, I'm not a leader of a team in my workplace. I'm more of the employee. And so I'm a little nervous to ask this question because you're going to spin the tables on me, and I'll be the,
I know, right?
the subject of thing. But what would you say to an employee? Okay, so now we're not talking about a leader of a business. We're talking about an employee. What would you say to an employee listening to our conversation who works at a place that they may find, draining, or they don't look forward to going to work in the morning? What would you say to that person?
Yeah. I would say back exactly to what you just referenced, Chris, in that you may not have a team you lead, but you actually, again, and here's the Maxwell phrase, right? Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. So the conversations, and I have had many conversations with employees who are like, yeah, well, I hate my job, or it's miserable, or my boss is a jerk, right? Don't worry, Chris. None of your team has said that. To me, anyways. I would say look at your areas of influence. What can you control? What are the things that are within your control? And look for areas to influence in a positive way. And the influence that we can have as employees on our leaders, the way looking at our leaders as human beings, right? Because sometimes as employees, we also look at our leaders and sometimes we do make, they should have it all together, right? Oh, I can't believe they said that. Okay, well, expand your scope. What if you would get to know them? You want them to get to know you? What if you would get to know them? What does grace look like for your leader? What does influence look like for your leader and for the people around you? And how do you have that opportunity to actually impact the culture and the environment yourself, one conversation at a time? And super cliche, but that's actually at the end of the day all we can control.
What would you say? Do you think that any workplace, okay, so I've worked in a factory. When I graduated from high school, I spent a year working in a factory. And then I went to university. And then since I've been pastoring, mostly, that's pretty much 99% of my life now. But do you think any workplace has a potential to be a good workplace where you can look forward to at least certain things about going to work?
Absolutely. I think, like, frankly, anytime you have a human element to a workplace, you have the potential for a horrible experience and you have the potential for an amazing experience. And so I think it doesn't actually matter. In fact, we work with organizations that are manufacturing, that are in different industries, that are labor-based, that work outside in all kinds of weather conditions. It's not all just professional services where, you sit in an office in a climate controlled environment and get a, hour-long lunch every day. We work with a lot of different clients in a lot of different sectors. I would say the key differentiator is when an organization is radically clear on their purpose and their values, and they have entrenched the living out of them throughout all levels of their organization. They're not just words on a wall with beautiful script. They're actually defined and living out through every single human being that works in that organization. Someone might hate the job that they do, but that can be true whether you're in a manufacturing job on the floor, and that can be true if you're the CEO of an organization. You might hate your job. Doesn't matter what you're doing. I think as workplaces, as business owners and leaders, owning the values and the purpose and driving that throughout is one of the keys.
Yeah. I just have, so I want to talk to you about some of the parenting side of things and working, but would you have any advice for someone? Like, let's say someone's been in a job and it's just the environment. It might have been even a job. The job itself might be like, I could actually like this, but the environment or whatever, like at what point does a person say enough's enough? I need out of here. Like, I mean, obviously you can't give us a whatever, but what would some of your thoughts be on that exactly? Like, how do you know when a place is like, you know what, I need to actually just go somewhere else?
Yeah. I think each person has to define why you're staying and what the end of your road is. If you're complaining day after day, week after week, month after month, and you're making every effort of everything that's within your control, right? That you're trying to influence, you're having the conversations, you're self-managing, you're doing your best, and you realize, there's nothing more I can do. I'm miserable. I think you need to move on, right? Sometimes it might not even be the workplace that's the problem. It's just a mismatch. right? It's a huge piece is, every time we coach businesses on recruitment and hiring, a big thing we say is look for someone who will fit your organization. Don't just look for a person to fill a job, but are they actually going to fit in here? For us at Homefield People and Strategy, one of our core values is actually fun. Like fun is a core value. And so when we're recruiting, we specifically look for, ask questions around, seek out, does this person love to have fun? Because like if you can't have some good laughs, take a joke, give a joke, like you're probably not going to love it here. Like if you are somebody who is a serious professional, who when we are at work, it is very serious. When we're working with clients, we don't joke around. This is serious. And that's your approach to work. There's nothing wrong with that at all, actually. Nothing. But you are really not going to love it here because one of the things our clients say, the most common thing our clients say about us is we're fun. Like you take serious topics and we have serious conversations, but somehow you make it fun. So we need someone to be that, to find success here. And so if we would have someone, they could try everything they could. And they may say, I just don't like, that's just not my jam. They actually should probably go to something that feels different, and they should be allowed to. It just doesn't always work.
That's a great question, Chris.
That is a good question.
So my other question would be, okay, so we've been talking about the workplace, and we use the example of Chris as a pastor kind of managing his pastoral team. But is there other parallels in a church context where you have, now you don't just have a pastor and his team, now you have a whole congregation. Is there other parallels between a business culture and a church culture? I'm wondering if you can maybe comment on that.
Yeah.
Make sure everything you say is stuff we're doing at Crossview.
That's so funny. So I think it's an interesting dynamic in a church context because your stakeholders are different, right? Like we would look at a scope of stakeholders, right? And our congregation, not just our members, but actually our congregation, whether they're members or not, would be considered stakeholders who have thoughts and opinions and insights into how they want to see the organization run and what they want the outcomes to be. And so in a business context, your stakeholders in that you might want to parallel would be your clients, your customers, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's even different because it's almost more of a cooperative.
Yes.
The way that I would look at it in a church, right? Because they have a stake in it. They're not buying from us. They're an engaged, invested, cooperative member.
Yeah.
And so the parallel that I would see is, interestingly enough, that's why my personal opinion is that churches need to have their organizational clarity around their purpose, their missions, their purpose, their values, their unique differentiators. Like, who are we, right? Why are we different? Why do people love to be part of this community? That needs to be radically clear, as well as what is our strategy? Like, where are we going? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Which is very different than a business strategy. Because to me, again, it goes back to the clarity so that our collective members, investors, stakeholders, people who really care can be actually really clear on whether they want to be a part of this or not.
Yeah, that's really good.
Because if everything is important, nothing is important.
Oh, yeah, so true.
If we're just trying to be like, oh, you're a Christian, good, you should come here, be part of our community. Right. Well, no, again, going back to the employee conversation, it actually might not be a fit, and that's so okay.
Amen. Got to use a Christian word in there.
Yeah. And so I think it's so, and interestingly enough, it's not a popular opinion, but it's my opinion, in that's why I think churches more than anything need to be so radically clear on that, so people know what they're signing up for. They can get excited about it. They can know here's where I fit in. We're going here in these areas, and this is where I plug in, and I can get so excited about that, and I can have a thought around that. I can contribute there, and I can impact some of the day-to-day stuff and different things, but there's a strategy that I believe in. And so that's where I feel they're the same and different.
And the goal isn't to get every single person to your church, because we can't go every direction at once. And obviously we're all, seeking after Jesus, but there's so many things within that then that can be mission specific, and not taking it personally then, right? Like when someone goes to another church, like, bless you, we actually need all the churches. Yeah. I absolutely love that. I want to just switch gears here just a little bit, because I want to make sure we get to this before we're done. I want to talk a little bit about, leading in a business and starting a business and what that's like as a parent. So for both dads and moms, and then any maybe differences or whatever that might come between moms and dads. But what were some of your biggest challenges being a parent with young kids and stepping out, starting a business? I'm sure that's going to resonate with a bunch of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. First of all, I think I'm really lucky in this situation that I started my business in that Paul and I were both self-employed at the time. Lucky or dumb, I'm not sure, because, we were trying to build a steady income, two people at a time. But I would say, in our situation, the distribution of work itself in our household was very, very even. Still is to this day. In fact, Paul would probably cook more and do more laundry than I would.
Way to go, Paul.
And I think, right? Yeah, I know. And he'd say, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's interesting what I see trending around in general, what my own anecdotal experience would be versus what tends to be the trend on what I see and hear. So in our world, the biggest challenge was figuring out, like most of us, how do we get work done when we have kids underfoot, right? And so our philosophy has always been to include our kids in a lot of our business conversations. I remember actually at one point taking Holly along to a business meeting, like at a client, because I had nothing else left to do. Again, this just goes back to the authenticity of real life. And she would have been she would have been preschool age. She probably was 4. She must have been 4 because she could write on a sticky note. Took her to a client into their boardroom.
Oh my goodness.
It was my first time meeting with them. I wouldn't necessarily advise this, but it was just where it was at. We chatted enough on the phone and I had enough, we connected enough where I just said, I'm really sorry, I'm in a bind. I'm going to have to take my daughter along. And they're like, totally, that's fine. It was with 2 other women. So I don't know if it would have been the same, if it would have been with men or not, but these were 2 other women and they were like, yeah, bring her along. And so Holly spent the entire business meeting in this boardroom of this highly established, large organization in Winnipeg, coloring on a whiteboard that they brought in. She sat on the floor, coloring on a whiteboard with whiteboard markers. She had Post-it notes there, and she actually wrote on one of the Post-it notes, the woman, she wrote, I love you, and then the woman's name, who I was meeting with, and brought it to her.
This might actually have been good for business in the end.
And interestingly enough, I'm still friends with that woman to this day. So her career path has changed. And so not necessarily a client. She was a client for years and we're still friends to this day. That was the first time she met. And so anyways, all that to say, our kids have been really integrated into a lot of what we do. And I think for working parents, we sometimes think they need to be so separate and we need to balance, right? Like the whole work-life balance concept. I've explained this to a lot of working moms who struggle a lot with guilt around working full-time, traveling for work, being away, missing things, and that kind of thing. I've said, instead of thinking about it as a work-life balance, and I think for dads, they're more invested today than we would have even seen 10 years ago. I look at it more like a pendulum, right? There's going to be seasons of our life where work is actually going to take more of our energy and focus than our family. And you know what? That's actually okay. That's okay. there'll be times where it has to swing that way. And the more we talk to our kids about it and our partners about it and talk and explain and describe the situation, the more understanding they're going to be. But then there will be times where we have to, especially then as leaders, recognize the pendulum will swing the other way, where then it goes towards our families there'll be seasons where our family needs more of us. And I'm sorry, I can only work 9 to 5, or I'm going to need to, we need to be flexible, forgive. And then there'll be those beautiful like blinks and moments of time where we'll be right in the middle.
For that one day.
So
Back in 2018. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So the gender differences, the way where I see them play out for sure, is we have seen coming out of the 2020, pandemic, we have seen a mass exodus of women from the workplace.
Really?
Because they are the ones who left jobs to take care of children at home. We have seen women's careers stunted because of the flexibility to be home. We've seen a drastic shift across North America in a backwards trend of equality in the workplace, gender equality in the workplace for career trajectory and compensation because of this unconscious, conscious bias, however it has played out, of women stepping back into their homes for whatever reason, right? Some of us maybe chose that on purpose because that's where we wanted to be. Maybe some, it was just simply the assumption that, well, my husband has to go to work. His job isn't flexible. Mine is, because we're used to those roles, right? So statistics say that and show that has been the impact coming out of the pandemic. And on the other side, I have had conversations with men who have said, I would love nothing more than to take a parental leave from work when my baby is born, but I am going to be mocked.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't do it, Jode. And I've tried to share with them, do it. Like, it's here for you. It doesn't matter how much I say. They say, yeah, I know. And I get that. But my boss is going to give me a hard time. And maybe even if they're fine with it, the guys at work are going to mock me. I will never live it down. So I think that that's the other edge of the coin when we look at the gender challenges in the workplace, right? Of, well, can't your wife do it? Or why do you need to be home? Your wife is home. Like, what are you? And so I think the more and more we can normalize the conversation of the balance of productivity and happy workplaces and engaged workplaces, and also the fact that work doesn't happen in a vacuum, family doesn't happen in a vacuum, I think the better off we'll be, and the more whole our employees will be, and I think our kids win too. Like, normalize work with our kids.
What are some ways, and then Chris, you're going to have some good questions. I just want to make sure we hit this before we move on. What are some, like, how could businesses be, and maybe it's not possible in some businesses, I don't know, but how could businesses be more parent friendly, or should they be more parent friendly? Are there practical ways they could be more parent friendly? And specifically with some of the things you said there, to be more maybe mom friendly, just because of the way our culture is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the way they can, and the way I'm seeing things shift more than they have in the past, are more flexible start and end times. Right? We hear a lot around, like, I need to just drop my kids off at school. I can't get in till 9 because I got to bring my kids to school. You hear people say, well, I got to pick up my kids at daycare at 5. I get charged $5 per minute for every minute I'm there after 5 picking up my kids. Yeah, that's true story. Like, it is, because you also think about, you got daycare workers there who, are people coming in to pick up their kids with a Starbucks in hand and 15 minutes late, right? So there's many, you can understand why policies get put into place. But as workplaces are trying to look at, how do we keep employees? How do we create workplaces that are parent and family friendly? I would say, though, being aware of those start and end times and the flexibilities around them. A lot of the flexibility of, can you work from home if your kid is sick, right? So you might have to, your kid is sick, you have to be home because, the rules, especially post-COVID, around return to daycare, return to school. Daycares, especially in preschools, are very strict with if a kid is sick, then they have to be out for a certain number of days. So do we have flexibility that our employees can work at home on those days, and productivity check-ins, whatever that needs to look like? And I think, the reality too, if we look specifically at moms, the return to work after a maternity leave, being extremely gracious to that onboarding time. It's not just a switch that you can flip, as well as they're really re-onboarding them again to a whole new world that they have to re-climatize and find their place in again. And being very aware of your unconscious bias in your hiring decisions, because you're fooling yourself if you're not realizing people are looking at a young married woman who's 22 years old, who's entering into a job, and male, female, it doesn't matter how conscious you are, those unconscious biases that are at play of, okay, well, I'm going to hire you. How many years are you going to go on mat leave? No, I'm going to hire someone who's older, who's done their family, who's younger. I'm going to hire a man, whatever, right? Like those unconscious biases at play. So how can you be more mom friendly, right? Like those are a couple ways. And yeah, that's kind of some of my thoughts around what I'm seeing. And I'm also seeing companies give family days. So if you need to take a day off to take your kids to the dentist, there's a certain number of paid family days.
Dentist.
Unpaid or paid family days.
Yeah.
Right? As if it's not painful enough. Now you got to take a day off work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I love that, Jody. I was just thinking about, and I do have a question after this one, and then I'll let Chris wrap it up. But, okay, so in COVID, during the season of COVID, businesses kind of adopted kind of this flexibility of working from home, which would have been favorable for young families. But coming out of COVID now, people are just quick to, let's just return to we go back to the way it was. And that it caused a bit of a tension. And so I'm sure that's kind of what you're referring to regarding what you were talking about, flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So my question there at the end here is, I'm thinking about especially a lot of families in our church in Crossview, and probably many in the community. And my family is kind of, we're entering the end of a season where our kids are getting to the point where they're all going to be in school full time. And my wife, she's not your typical stay-at-home mom. She wants to go back into the workforce. What would you say to that young family who kind of in between season trying to figure out what are the next steps? What would you say to that family?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it all goes back to just like I would advise a business. What's your own family clarity? What's your purpose? What are your values? Yeah. What do we have to be very real about our own little family strategy around what's going to stay the same, what's going to change, and how will that change everybody's roles? Because if mom starts going back into the workforce, honestly, the most bedraggled working moms that I know, and I lived it myself too, is part-time. If a mom goes back to work part-time while the kids are in school, guess what? She usually still keeps the full-time at-home responsibilities. And the part-time job. And it just does. From a combination of, I've always done it, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
To I'm not even thinking to pick things up. So a family in that position, I would, again, it goes back to clarity and strategy, just like it would be for business, and being really prepared for how is everybody's role going to change, including kids. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, buddy, what are you going to do? Buddy number 2, what's your job going to be? How are we all? And here's the language, not to support mom to go back to work, but to support our family making a decision for our family. And here are the reasons why.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And if you don't talk that through, you're so right, Jody. Yeah, just send, and then dad might be a very, progressive with it, accepting dad. And he's like, I'm supporting you, honey, to go after work. But the unspoken thing is, and you're going to keep doing everything you were doing while you were not part-time working. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. And the reality is that I think is forgotten sometimes, especially in the world of stay-at-home moms who do want to enter back into the workforce, is a revalidation of the value that they bring to the world outside of home. Because there's a lot of internal work that we go through when we re-enter back into the workforce. And the revalidation of all the project planning, the scheduling, the mapping, the dispatching, the finances, the everything, right? And you actually look at all of those components and how much that can, as well as often an empathetic heart and an organized mindset, or maybe a disorganized mindset, but a love for people, right? So I think dialing into those strengths and that what that experience can bring into the world and how everyone else can benefit from that. I think there's a combined responsibility to cheer these moms on, to recognize like you have mad skill set that the world really, really would love to tap into. And if that's what you want to do, then you'll find your place to contribute that.
Oh, thanks, Jody. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
If I'm,
Yeah.
I am too.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really awesome. Thank you so much. I think there's gonna be a bunch of moms hopefully inspired and dads inspired, and then just everybody else to think differently about work and have hope for work. So thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, that is it for another fun conversation. Make sure you come back again in 2 weeks for our next episode. And again, if this is a show that you have enjoyed and you are excited about, please help us out by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast as more episodes are released. If you have any questions about anything that has been said in these episodes, please let us know at outsidethewalls@crossviewchurch.ca. Thank you, and we will see you again.